Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host.
Hi everyone, welcome to another Tutoring Tips episode of the Prepped and Polished podcast. This is Aaron from Prepped and Polished. Please be sure to check out our website at www.preppedandpolished.com. For tutoring in person or online, call us at 781-753-9951 or chat with us instantly on our website. You can join the Prepped and Polished community on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Prepped and Polished. If you have questions after the show, please feel free to ask us a question on the chat feature of our website. We love hearing from you. Now let's get right into episode number 232, General Tips to Improve a Low Score on the SAT or ACT. One of the most challenging things to deal with either on the ACT or the SAT is knowing what you need to do to improve a score. And sometimes when you're dealing with a lower score, it can sometimes seem like a mountain to try and overcome. However, there are usually a few general tips that we can do to improve our scores. First one is setting goals. Now it's important to keep this in mind. What is a realistic goal for you to get your score to increase from versus an unrealistic goal? Sometimes we want to look at an ACT score and we want to bump it up by 10 or 12 points. Other times an SAT score we might want to increase by 200 or 300 points. What matters is knowing, does it make sense to aim so high for a score that it becomes unrealistic? That given a certain amount of time or a certain score range, can you make that score, and does it make sense to try and aim for that? Now, I'm not trying to say you don't want to aim high, but sometimes it's good to start off with a realistic goal. Maybe it's 2 or 3 points on the ACT. Maybe it's 50 points on the SAT. And as time continues, you're able to increase that score. It's really important when you're trying to improve a score that you keep this in mind, that you have to have goals that works for where you're currently at in terms of your score. Another tip to consider is, what is the timeline that you have? What does your schedule look like? If you have not that much time before a test, we can only look at improving the score a bit, versus if you have months to prepare for the test, you might be able to get a higher increase with continued practice. If you're taking the test in the fall, but you play a sport in the fall, or you have some other kind of commitment outside of school, how will that affect the amount of time you can commit per day, per week, or per month towards improving your score? It's important to start at the base, to understand what I need to do to accomplish the goal of improving my score. Once we are able to get a sense of how much time we have, what are our goals, then we can really work on the particulars, such as content and strategies. If it is something that is content-based or strategy-based that you're struggling with, maybe content-wise it's knowing polynomials. Maybe strategy-wise it's just time management in the reading section of the test. It's important to identify these aspects that you're struggling with. In terms of content, what you want to try and do is create a list of topics that you either don't know, have trouble answering, or know that you make simple mistakes on. The reason to create a list is to help to start a study guide for any section of the test, whether that be English language, reading, math, science if you're taking the ACT, or even the difference between certain calculator versus no calculator questions on the SAT. By creating a list, it helps you to organize yourself. Now, if you're dealing with strategies, usually this is where we consider what you typically do when you encounter a question or when you're trying to determine which answer choice is correct. Think about what strategies you typically use and then you can improve them. Maybe it might be something that you're not very aware of what you're doing when you answer a question. This is where you might want to think, I want to write out step 1, 2, 3, and 4 on how I answer this question. Then try another question. See if there are any common parts to the steps or any general steps you can make. It might also be good to ask other people, even your tutor, for general strategies for approach for either specific passages or question types when they appear on either the ACT or SAT. Now, the biggest tip that I can give here is the next one, which is discipline and homework. If you have a goal in mind, you have to, unfortunately, put work into that goal. If you want to be able to get this score, you need to work on motivations as to why you want to get this score. And think about what makes it most likely that I can attain that goal. I always consider doing a little bit each and every day. A little bit can go a long way. Obviously, if you only have a week before the test, that can't be the same case. However, if you have enough time, daily practice will get you there. You also want to learn from your mistakes and work towards not making them again. This includes writing down, this was my answer choice, this is why I said it, and this is why it's wrong. Here's the correct answer, and here is why it's right. That simple question, why, can go a long way for any question on the test. I'll leave you now with this final tip, and that is to seek those who know the test. We at Prepped and Polished work with students on both the ACT and SAT in one-on-one settings and in group sessions on how they can approach the test correctly. We work with students who are trying to improve their low scores and high scores to get a score that is in their goal range and what they will be happy with. Now, if you have done all this and you're still needing more help, please feel free to contact us. We are happy to set up consultations and sessions with you or your student, your child, to help them work on realizing what goals and what specific strategies and content they need to learn to improve their score on the test. Again, if you can work on creating a structure and organize, it will help you not only for the tests, but also later on in life. This wraps up our show, episode number 232, General Tips to Improve a Low Score on the SAT or ACT. Be on the lookout for our next episode, number 233. Thanks for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.